Right, okay, folks. So I think we're on PowerPoint number five um, of the series, and a bit a shorter one today for us, resistance training progressions. And it's just to basically show you ways of progressing your training, your strength training, without actually having to think about always just increasing the load. There's other ways we can do that, but we also don't want to increase too many variables at once. So I'm not going to waste any more further time, folks. I'm just going to get straight into it. So our first progression method we've got is load, which is the resistance we're using, which is the weight or the load that we are using, or we're pressing, we're pulling, we're squatting against. So how much weight's on the bar, the dumbbell, body weight exercises, resistance bands, whatever we're using there, any other way of adding some resistance to your workout or to the exercise. We've also got the speed of the exercise, and there's the resistance training exercise, how fast it's done. I don't know if you have maybe heard before of speed reps. That's where you go from slower, working on form, technique, lighter work, to maybe working up the weights a wee bit, but actually trying to work more so on your speed than compared to trying to slow it down, time under tension. You're trying to get through it a lot faster. So these are what we've called as speed reps. After that, you've got complexity of the exercise. So obviously, the more complex an exercise is, the harder it's going to get. So, for instance, you've got your simpler exercises such as your isolation work, which could be bicep curls, tricep extension, lateral raises. Some isolation, not too hard, not too demanding. Maybe hit a lactic acid threshold very quickly, but they can be done without too much thinking. And then you've got your other side of the spectrum, which would be more your sort of Olympic lifts, snatches, clean snatch balance. Um, you could even possibly say like squats and deadlifts would fall under that category because of the complexity and because there's just so many coaching cues and teaching points within them. And last, we've got stability. So what I mean by that is how stable we actually are, how much your core is working during a any particular exercise. So you go from a bilateral movement, which could be a squat, it could be a TRX squat. So it's the most balance you're going to get. You're holding on to something while squatting. You're not just using your body weight. And then you can progress that all the way on to, say, a single leg pistol squat, where you're obviously it's unilateral. You're using one leg, and you're not using anything as a sort of support either. So that's your four different progression methods, and I'm now going to go over ways you can improve them or ways you can progress them over time, so it's not always just about increasing weights. So first of all, we've got load. So your lighter loads are working more on technicality of the exercise, form, training age needs to be taken into consideration here when you're adding load to an exercise. If you're new to training, it is the worst decision in the world to just fire weights onto something just for the sake of it. So what you need to be doing here is looking at your training age. Are you a beginner? Are you advanced? Are you new to doing these exercises, or have you been doing them a while? If you're new to training, then light's the way to go. I always say this, and I get asked all the time, what sort of weight should I be lifting? And my answer to that is, no one knows but you. No one knows your body better than yourself. So use a bit of common sense there. Use a weight you can manage, but also don't use a weight that's going to be too easy either. You want to be challenging yourself to some extent or another. And start light. Always start light. The worst thing that happens in the world here is you start light and it's too easy. So you do a couple of reps and say, no, that's too easy. Let's take the weight up a bit. Nothing wrong with that at all. But when you're first starting off a training phase or an exercise program, it is a bit of a guessing game, to be honest, on what sort of weight you should be starting on. Your first couple of weeks might be like that, but that's absolutely fine because we can always work our way up to that, and that's where a load's so important. And it's a great form of progressive overload, and it's one that is probably the most popular, of course. If you're lifting 100 kilo one week, then you want to try 105 the next week. You want to show that progressive overload, and that increases intensity, and that creates a shock on the body. It creates tear in muscle fibres. It's something the body's not been used to before, and that in turn builds muscle. So your moderate load is more for anatomical adaptation. So this is where we're maybe advancing the exercise a wee bit, or our training age is a wee bit higher than just a beginner. Maybe training a year or so, we can work a wee bit on hypertrophy, so building muscle. We can work a bit on sort of bodybuilding style training, actually getting the feel of the sort of the pump for the training. You're maybe working to higher rep ranges like endurance, but you're able to complete every single rep with good form whilst the weight is still, or the load is still fairly high. So that's anatomical adaptation. You then move up the higher end of the spectrum, and again, I would only move up this end of the spectrum if you were more advanced in your training, because you're going to be working with heavier loads, and obviously this in turn can be a lot more dangerous, especially without a spotter or a trainer or anyone with you. So it's working on heavy and max strength. So obviously it's the best way to work. The best way to work on strength is to go through lighter loads, heavier loads, and go through fewer reps. So you're on a bench press and you want to improve your bench press. I suggest working through rep ranges of maybe 6 and below, and work through that sort of rep range. The only problem you get off this, or the backlash you'll get off this, is the damage it does to the CNS system, so your central nervous system, and your joints, tendons, ligaments, all going to take a bit of pounding with your heavier lifts, especially your big compounds, just because it is the load that your joints have got to take at that moment in time. But they've got to be used to be able to take that load to be able to progress it as well. So if you're used to deadlifting 100 kilo for 5, and your body's never deadlifted 110 before, it's a lot of strain on the joints and central nervous system because it's not been used to before, albeit it's only one rep. It's a heavy load and it's a load your body's never been used to before. But that's for more advanced, for working on strength. And I would dare say it works on hypertrophy as well. There's certain rep ranges for strength, hypertrophy and endurance. But the way I see it is, if you want to be big, if you want to build muscle, then you need to be working on your max strength. You need to be, if it's a quote that's always stuck with me from this, just a member of the gym I actually looked up to when I first started out training, and he just put it to me simply, and he says, "You want to be big, you got to eat big, and you got to lift big." And that's a quote that's always just stuck with me, and it's because it rings so true. You're not going to get that size or that stature without lifting the heavy enough weights. But with that being said, we're not just talking about bulking here. We're not just talking about gaining some size. We're talking about gaining muscle here. You're not going to gain muscle without gaining the strength in the first place. So it needs to be progressed with the athlete's needs, or your needs. So if you're looking at improving strength, then with the right training age, yes, let's work on some strength work. Let's work on bench presses at 5 sets of 3. Let's work up to 1 rep max squats, and let's look at improving that. If you're working in strength, if you're working more so an endurance sport, like I don't know, it could be tennis, could be anything where it maybe requires a good bit, or even MMA, boxing, where you require a good bit of shoulder endurance. You're also working through higher rep ranges, and you're working on that anatomical adaptation as well. Higher rep ranges, weights a wee bit lower, but not too low where you don't feel as if you're being worked hard enough, and your form should still stay fairly good until you maybe get to see you're doing reps of 12. Then you should maybe feel 10, 11 and 12 being a bit of a struggle, fatigue starting to kick in and form starting to drop ever so slightly. But for the majority of the set, the form should be good. And lastly on this one, earn the right to progress, earn the right to put the weight up. And again, this is something I'm big on with people I'll train, and that is, say you're doing a bench press phase and you can do 4 sets of 8 at 60 kilograms, brilliant. Week 2, let's go 4 sets of 8 at 62.5 or 65. Now on week 2, we didn't get 4 sets of 8 though. We get a set of 8, a 7, a 5 and a 4. So would we up that to 70 the next week? Well, no, it would be a bit silly to up that to 70 when we couldn't get our 4 sets of 8 at our 65. So what we'll do now is, we'll go to do that 65 again the following week on week 3, and we'll aim to get 4 sets of 8 this time. We're not pushing our weights up until we complete our full sets of 8, or whatever the sets and reps are. That's me just using an example for you. But complete your sets and reps first at a certain weight, and that's your body's way of telling you, look, I can do this now, push me that wee bit further. Get weight on that bar. So next up, we've got speed. So, as mentioned slightly before, you're slowing down the exercises as more so to work on strength work. You can't do speed reps with them because your body's just not capable of producing that power or that speed against the force pushing against you. Medium, you will be working on a lot of power work, so you maybe want to think of ballistics and plyometrics here. You want to think of jumping lunges, jump squats, jump trap bar deadlifts, anything sort of explosive, box jumps where you're working on your power. And then when we're working through speed, we're also going at a faster tempo, so these can be things like weighted shuttle runs. These could be things like it could be absolutely anything. Lighter barbell work on a deadlift. So you're used to lifting 100, right? We're going to lift 60, but the bar's going to fly up. We're taking form into consideration. Of course we are, because we don't want to injure ourselves. We want to be working through speed reps. Get them done that wee bit quicker, or get them done really fast. So as you're training your body into thinking, right, if that's what we can do with that weight, we can lift it up really fast, and we can lift it up in an ample amount of time. And let's try and up the weight again. And let's try and work on that speed rep again. Let's try and make sure it shoots up the same way the last one did. This in turn will help your strength, and then will help your speed in the process. So it's going to help your speed, and it's also going to help your muscle gain as well, or your strength gain for that sense. So working through your speed patterns when doing specific movements, especially complexes, and then adding a wee bit more weight to them and working at doing them at the same sort of speed. So that's another way of improving or advancing your resistance training, or a resistance training progression. So work through building a basic strength base. So especially if you're a beginner, you could spend a couple of years on this, to be honest. Building a good strength base, it does take you that long to get into it. You need to know what you're doing with exercise. You need to be executing form right before you actually move on to building that strength. And then once you've built that strength, it's time to progress from there. It's trying to say, right, I've got a good strength base here. How can we make that a wee bit faster? And there's equipment out there that would help as well. You've got things like your bench slingshot. It keeps your elbows and everything in line. It kind of gives you a bit of a boost with a bench press. You've got things like belts and stuff as well that you'd use for squatting or even deadlifts as well. They keep everything in line. Keep your core supported and everything in with your core as well when you're doing these exercises to help you work on that strength. Not lie, speed's probably one of the last ones I would go to in terms of advancing my resistance training, but at the same time it works all the same. My first would be the load, it would always be the weight. But if you're looking to change up and improve it in some other way, then working on your speed's good too. Okay, so complexity, that's a nice easy one for me, because it is just how hard an exercise gets. So you go from easy to moderate to difficult. The best way of putting that is incline press, or an example of that would be incline press up, pike press up, and then handstand press up. And that would be your progression. So they're all one form of a press up or a push up, but each is harder than the other. So each advancement is harder than the other. And you get handstand push up, and it's about as hard as you get for push ups or press ups when it comes to complexity. But this could be said for many exercises. You've got the likes of, you could go wall squat, goblet squat, overhead squat, back squat. Again, using different progressions, using different complexity of these exercises. Like I said, this can be done for many different exercises or resistance training exercises, and this is one of the simpler forms of it. So think, how can I make this exercise harder without looking like one of the dafties that sits in the middle of, or stands in the middle of a gym floor, and he's using the preacher curl machine, but he's standing on a step box to to shrug it, or you're using a Smith machine to leg press, like without taking it to that extent, use common sense. How do I make it more complex? What's the advancement of this exercise? The same variation as this exercise, but harder, without looking like a tool, basically. So next up we've got stability, which is another big one. But again, at the same time with this one, I see a lot of people do this in the gym. It's like using Bosu balls and stuff, which is absolutely brilliant. But for instance, if you're doing squats on a Bosu ball, okay, good core stability, you need good balance to be able to do so. But your core's actually being worked a lot more, and more muscles are contracting when you're doing a squat with, say, with more weight on the bar, with a barbell on your back, because of the load, because you're allowed to take the load greater than how you could produce your stability on a Bosu ball. So you're actually being worked a bit harder by increasing the load. So again, without looking like a tool in the gym, think of different ways of progressing a single exercise through stability. And this more or less comes from doing bilateral movements, so movements where you're using either both arms, both legs, to going from a less stable, so a split stance, which could be like, say, your split squats, to then going on to single leg work, which you'll see there as your pistol squats. So again, I'm just a couple of different exercise progressions of them could be, so you could work through well, first I would say press up, then you go bench press, then flat dumbbell press, then an alternating flat dumbbell press. They get harder as they go on, they get less stable. So you're as stable as you get in the press up. Bench press requires a bit more core stability. You then move on to a flat dumbbell press, and because you're not taking the hold of the same bar, it's two separate dumbbells, again requires a wee bit more stability in the core. And then you move on to what was the last one I had there for the bench press? Oh, an alternating flat dumbbell press. That's right, because you're coming down one side at a time. It's unilateral. It's one arm at a time. And you've got to also hold one of your arms up whilst the other's down, which is great core stability, just because of the unevenness of it. So stability is another one we could be improving in terms of advancing our resistance training. Now, more or less to conclude here with our resistance training progressions, I've made a list of a few exercise progressions, some which might stand out to you, some which might actually shock you, because you'll see some when I first looked at them, I thought, well, I would actually say the one before looks harder than the one that comes after, but there is a reason for that, and the best example I can give is if you maybe go to your knee on bilateral. So that goes from a wall squat, yep, I could agree with that. Goblet squat, yep, I agree with that. To overhead squat, which I would actually maybe think was the more advanced, because I would think it's more complex. The likes of a front squat or a back squat. I would have my back squat and I would have probably swapped that out with the overhead squat in that one beforehand. But the reason the overhead squat is before the likes of the front squat or the back squat is because with an overhead squat, once you're in that position, it forces every joint into the right position with the squat. Now, although your overhead squat might not look great at the time, there can be improvements made to it. It's going to force your hips back. It's going to keep your back straight. It's going to have all the weight on your toes. So these are things you don't need to think about when doing this exercise. Whereas your front squat, you need to think about a bit more. It's still easier to come onto the soles of your feet. And then your back squat, there's so much you can go wrong with that. Your knees can start coming in. Your feet could be pointing inwards. Your knees could be coming over your toes. You could be pushing off the soles of your feet. Whereas none of this will happen when overhead squat, because your arms are overhead and you're taking a weight. It forces you to get into these positions anyway. So that's why the back squat's actually after the overhead squat. And there's probably a few in there you're looking at and thinking, well, I wouldn't have said so. So just to give a couple examples on here, because I don't want to spend too much time just going over every single example of exercise progressions. But then we've got a trunk stabilisation and the progressions of that. So working on our core, you start on plank on knees, because again, it's as easy as it gets. It takes a bit of your weight off and you're still working on your core ever so slightly. Once you master that, you can then go into a full plank. Hips, shoulders, heels, keep them all in line. Brace your core, make sure your lower back doesn't dip. After that, you can then go into a moving plank, which would be a plank. You could do Spider-Man planks, which would be one knee in at a time towards your elbow. Again, just adding that sort of movement into it, so it's not just an isometric hold anymore. Creates that complexity of the exercise. You then move on to kneeling rollouts, which I'm sure a lot of us have used the ab wheel when you've seen how difficult they can actually be. One of the most difficult exercises in the gym, actually. And again, it's more advanced than a moving plank. You're lucky to get a couple out of it, to be honest, unless you do them all the time. And then last of all, and you really need to have a good core to be able to do these, are your standing rollouts. So you think how hard these are on your knees. You then try to do them from a standing position and bring yourself back to that standing position. And then one movement can be very difficult. I actually think a good bridge between the kneeling rollouts and a standing rollout is setting a barbell or a Smith machine or whatever up to about just below chest height, sticking a resistance band around it, going inside the resistance band, and then doing your standing rollouts from there. So as you get a bit of resistance to pull you back when you're down on the floor. And then I think from that standing rollout, then can come your, or that resistance band standing rollout can then come your full standing rollouts, because it gives you a bit of confidence doing the exercise as well, to say, right, I can do that. There's only one way to push it from here, and that's me doing it with no added resistance. But work your way up with that as well. Use a heavy resistance band and work to a lighter one until you can eventually do body weight. Okay, folks, to conclude, with your resistance training progressions, earn the right. Always earn the right to progress. Don't just fire weight on a bar for the sake of it. Don't just start doing standing rollouts for the sake of them. Earn the right first. Don't let your ego get in the way. Master one exercise before you move on to the next. Kiss. Keep it simple, stupid. So yeah, keep the exercises simple until you're ready to progress them. Similar to earn the right. Fit the needs of what you're wanting to do. If you need a lot of core stability and balance in an exercise, then you want to be looking at improving your stability. If you're working on max strength, then you want to look at improving the load. If you're working on speed, you want to look at improving your speed reps. So keep it simple and make sure it fits you. Progress through variation. So yes, it doesn't always need to be load, doesn't always need to be speed. It can be a mixture of things, but not ever all variables at the same time. The reason for that is do too much at the same time becomes overwhelming. You're not be able to do it, and it actually takes away from what you're looking to do, because all the variables are changing. It actually tends to, instead of not hitting one variable too much, you're trying to change too much at the one time, and your body can't adapt to it. Therefore, you can't perform it correctly. And only use advanced methods if experienced and need to overcome plateau. So if you feel like your training needs that extra bit of push, you've been training a while now, you're not seeing the results, then there is 4 different ways, and 4 good different ways you can advance your resistance training in terms of pushing your training even harder and reaching your goals. But that concludes us for today, folks. You've got me on my YouTube channel now. If you need anything, drop me a wee message. If there's anything else I can help with, then please let me know, and I'm happy to get in touch. Thank you.